welcome in to this special Jets report. I am Danny Scott, your New York Jets beat reporter, joined alongside Ryan Gregware, who got to cover the Jets Thursday night game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ryan, the season started off with so much promise, starting off 5-2, well in line in the playoff hunt in the AFC. Since then, they've dropped 5 out of their last 6 and 6 out of their last 8 games. Ryan, what's been going on with this team?
Yeah, well, first off, Danny, it was great to cover a game. It's great to be with you. But I think realistically, when you look at it, the top kind of fell off with not having a quarterback. I think you can only win so much in this league when you're getting basically a non-zero from the quarterback position. You give credit to Mike White. He came in there, won that first game, played competitive versus the Vikings, got them to the 1-yard line. He gets, dinged up versus the Bills. That's going to be a tough game in Buffalo to win 2 versus the Bills this year. I think that was unrealistic. But then you really look at the last 2 weeks, because when the Jets started 7-4, Danny, you looked at, okay, Lions, Jags, back-to-back at home. Those are wins. Those are free wins. Both teams at that point, the Lions started, I think, 1-6. The Jaguars were 4-7. They were free-falling. So that looked like an opportunity where the Jets had done such a good job of beating the bad teams. You look, the Dolphins without Tua, the Bears without Justin Fields. They'd taken care of business throughout this year versus teams they should have. So it looked like with 7 wins, you could only almost play the schedule game. Okay, that gets you to 9. Then maybe you steal 1 of 3, at the end of the year versus the Seahawks, Dolphins, possibly the Vikings. That was what it looked like. 10-7 was not out of the question, and all they needed to go really was 3-3 down the stretch. But obviously, they didn't do so. Mike White, he gets banged up in that Bills game, tough as nails, stays in. He's clearly hurt, but he couldn't get cleared the last 2 games. So then Zach Wilson comes in after the benching, after the humiliation, saying that it wasn't on the offense when they didn't score, more than a field goal versus the Patriots. He gets his second shot. And Danny, frankly, he blew it. He absolutely blew it. We can look at the stats in the Lions game. They didn't look as horrible as he probably played. 317 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. They end up losing 20-17. Then you flash forward to this week. This is where, in primetime, standalone game, the whole world was watching, and Zach Wilson, he frankly just did not deliver.
Yeah, and I want to get to that Jacksonville game, but we have some audio from Zach Wilson after the Lions game. They talked about how he does need to play better, and here's what he had to say.
Gotta be better, man. I think you guys saw we had, explosive plays offensively, but, it's the first and second down, just staying ahead of the sticks, and, I can think of a number of plays, I left out there. So, they got to look at it as a learning process, just try and keep it improving, every single week, and that's the goal.
Zach Wilson said, I just have to be better. And it's really what it came down to for a lot of these games. Mike White came in and played very well against the Bills. However, he goes down with those rib injuries. And then this past week, Zach Wilson on national TV, like you mentioned, Ryan, just couldn't get it done. It was abysmal to watch. I feel really bad for Jets fans who have been so excited all year long about this team, what they've been able to do, especially on the defensive side of the football. And then you get on national TV and just lay an egg like that. It's a bad look for the organization. And it all falls down on the shoulders of Zach Wilson.
Well, it's funny, Danny, because for years, the Jets have been getting embarrassed in prime time, right? Even when they're half decent. But this seemed like a change of the guard where they were a respectable franchise this year. Robert Saleh, and we can definitely criticize him for some of the things he's done these last few weeks, especially if we look more at the Lions game here in a second. But he's a respectable head coach. He demands and commands respect around the NFL. So this looked like a year where we had to wait all season for the Jets to be in the spotlight. And it seemed like this was the worst possible time for that, because the last few weeks, it really felt like things were trending in the wrong direction. Going into this game with how well the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence, who you were a game away from drafting, were playing, this had all, the signs of being a funeral for the Jets. And it's fitting because it looked like the same old Jets, not able to move the ball. The first half stats, I'll just list them right now. I do want to go more into the Lions game in a second, but the first half versus the Jaguars, 3 first downs, 4 rushing yards on 5 carries, 4 penalties. There is not a football game you can win with that. And you give credit to the defense for keeping a minute. I think they'd be 13-1, 14-1 if they've scored 23 points in every game. The Vikings was the only game where the opponent scored more than that. So that's great defense. And I think you can look at what they did, kind of getting gashed in the first half versus the Jags. Lions, they were one play away from winning that game, certainly deserve some criticism. And I think Zach Wilson is catching a lot of the flack. A lot of that is because of his, though, lack of accountability early in the year when he said that it wasn't on the offense for scoring 3 points versus the Patriots. That resonated with Jets fans. That was frustration setting in because how much time do you give a second overall pick to show anything, right? Jets fans aren't asking the world. This roster is talented enough with Garrett Wilson, rookie, approaching 1,000 yards, Sauce Gardner making the Pro Bowl, Quinnen Williams having a monster year. He had a forced fumble on the first drive versus the Jaguars, the only bright spot for the Jets. There's talent on this roster. When the quarterback, one, isn't playing well, hasn't shown any signs, and isn't taking accountability, he's going to get harped on. And I think that's where you saw the narrative really flip to where it's almost like the Jaguars game. The Jets fans were anticipating an opportunity to boo him. You look on social media, his mom is catching flack from Jets fans. And obviously we don't condemn that. That's, inexcusable. But people were waiting to harp on Zach Wilson, chanting, "We want Joe Flacco," who's looked like a shell of himself this year. It really speaks volumes to how poorly he's played really this whole year. And it's miraculous. The team is still above 500. I think they're 5-4 in his starts.
Yeah. And you mentioned Sauce Gardner making a Pro Bowl. The Jets had 4 Pro Bowlers this year. 3 of them are on the defense. 1 of them is a special teamer. They don't have a single Pro Bowler on the offensive side of the football. And in the last 2 games, we've seen why. I mean, Garrett Wilson is a stud. He is honestly the future of this offense alongside Breece Hall, who probably would have been a Pro Bowler if he hadn't gotten hurt this year. But those 2 are pretty much it when you look at the Jets offense. I mean, you got Elijah Moore, who's solid. I wouldn't say he's a game changer. He looked like he might have been at the beginning of the year, but with Zach Wilson playing, he hasn't played great. And then outside of Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, the rest of the wide receiver core is good, not great. They're about as average of a receiver core that you're going to see in the NFL, but they can play better if they have that quarterback that's going to be able to get them the ball. They have a team that can make plays, and Michael Carter is not a slouch of a running back. Bam Knight has been playing decent since he's kind of emerged onto the scene. And then you go and trade for James Robinson and haven't played him in the last 3 weeks. So this team, it really just feels like the wheels are fully off the bus. But they do have a couple of bright spots. That defense is stellar. They're very young. The offensive line is young and banged up right now. Next year, it should be a lot better. But after the Lions game, I talked to Garrett Wilson, and he was very disappointed in the entire team's play. Here's what he had to say about that game.
They had a good little scheme, and it takes all 11 of us. It takes all 11 of us, and we receivers weren't as open as we should have been, and line got to hold up for a second longer, and we got to not be in 3rd and 15, 3rd and 13, whatever it is. There's a lot of things that go into it. It takes all 11, and I was just out there running my routes, and I could have got more separation, all that. It's a lot of things that go into it.
And Ryan, this Jets offense has just been so abysmal the last 2 weeks. The running game has just been not able to get anything going. You mentioned 4 yards in the first half. They've been shut down to under 100 yards in both of the last 2 games, when it really felt like at the beginning of the year, it was this defense and this running game that was carrying most of the load on their shoulders. And Zach Wilson just had to go in and not make mistakes, and he was doing that for a while. But since then, it really just feels like they can't move the ball on offense whatsoever.
Yeah, and a lot of it's Zach Wilson, but you can't put all the blame on him. I'm sorry. The last 2 weeks, you talked about Bam Knight, such a fun story early in his tenure as, the go-to running back. These last 2 weeks, though, you look at the Jets on the ground, 22 carries for 50 yards versus the Lions, 20 for 66 versus the Jags. That's 42 for 116.
And 54 of those yards came from their backup quarterback, Chris Trevler, who had 2 drives.
Yeah, so their backup quarterback, a CFL backup, was their leading rusher, did not start the game, had not had an NFL snap before that game. So that puts into perspective exactly how bad the running game was. You're not going to win a lot of games in this league with that when Zach Wilson's your quarterback. Also, this offensive line, Danny, it really has fallen off the last few weeks. The guy that's getting a ton of blame right now, the Pro Bowler from the Niners, last year, Lakin Tomlinson comes in here, and it's very apparent that Trent Williams really kind of protected him back there and made his job a lot easier, because that might be the worst contract that Joe Douglas has handed out as his tenure of the GM of the Jets. You look back the last few years, this draft class, and I'm a huge Joe Douglas guy, this draft class is saving him from getting a lot of the perception changing, because you look at some of the impact players they've drafted early. Mekhi Becton, he has been not able to stay on the field the last 2 years whatsoever. This offensive line, they've done a most expensive in the league in terms of how much they're showing out. It's not near the top of the league right now. You need almost a complete overhaul. Pray guys stay healthy. So a lot of the blame does go to some of the personnel moves the Jets have made. It's not just on Zach Wilson. This receiving core, it's Garrett Wilson, and then it's question marks. Elijah Moore is a second-round pick. He has shown flashes. I'm sorry. He is not worth that second-rounder right now. Corey Davis, I think $11 million cap hit next year, something the Jets will have to look at cutting, because he hasn't done enough to prove it. Had a really bad drop in that, it was the Streveler drive late in that game. It really hurt and, limited a potential touchdown drive to cut it to a one-possession game. So there are question marks on this roster, particularly the offensive side of the ball. Is you need to figure out the quarterback, you get aggressive, maybe you get another receiver, and then the offensive line needs complete overhaul. So yes, I think we're talking about the Jets as a team ready to win now. They have a ton of talent, but it's not just a quarterback away. That is the one area where I push back on it just a little bit. I think they need to do a better job in the trenches, particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
The one disagreement that I'm going to have with you there is, when this offensive line is healthy, it can be very good. They
when
lost,
it's healthy versus when it's actually healthy, right? It's all questions, because we haven't seen the full five play a game this year.
They lost AVT, who was very, very good in that right guard position. And I do think once Mekhi Becton, if Mekhi Becton can ever get healthy, he'll help Lakin Tomlinson out a lot. And then Dwayne Brown is very good in that right tackle spot if he can stay healthy. And then you got a 6th-round pick in Max Mitchell, who's been playing pretty solid, not Pro Bowl caliber, but definitely not.
And he went down with a, unfortunate health scare there. So yeah, they've definitely had some unfortunate scenarios. You brought up AVT. He was on his way to being one of the best guards in the NFL, but there's ifs and there's whens. And that seems like the last few years, that's what it's always been when you factor in the offensive line. And I guess, Danny, last few minutes here, we shift ahead to where the Jets go from here. Who is their quarterback? What are they going to do? I think Robert Saleh, he was asked this question straight up. Is Zach your franchise quarterback following his benching in the Jaguars game? And here's what he had to say.
We're never going to quit on anybody, Rich. It's I've got confidence in all our guys. I don't know how many years I've been in the league now. It's been a while, but I just feel like every single year there's a kid who just is struggling and everybody wants to quit on them. And this might not be their year, but it doesn't mean that next year can't be their year. And that's everybody on the roster. And as long as that person is wearing a Jets uniform, we're going to do everything we can to pour our hearts and souls into these kids. Now, at the end of the day, the best players will always play. You guys know that. That's how we stand. But at the same time, as long as they're here, as long as they're playing for the Jets, we're going to pour everything we can to help them be the best version of themselves they can be. And if that best version earns a right on the spot on the field, then that'll happen.
And you hear it there. To not give a definitive answer on a second overall pick, less than 3 seasons into his NFL career, it's very telling. He brings up the point of it being the whole roster. Whoever's the best player on our roster is going to start. Well, if that's the case, Danny, and Mike White is healthy, he gets these last 2 games. He's deserved that. He's shown more promise. I think you throw away the draft pedigree. He's shown more NFL promise than Zach Wilson on the field. So this season, I think we could go over the funky playoff scenario in a minute here, but I think you go to Mike White. I don't know what more Zach Wilson needs to show out there to prove he's not your guy. So if Mike White's healthy, I can't see a reason he's not your quarterback the next 2 weeks.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Mike White has definitely proven, at least to me personally, that he's the best quarterback on that roster. And he's a guy that reminds me a lot. You bring up the 49ers earlier. He reminds me a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo, where he's a guy that's going to come in. He's not going to make these crazy plays, but he's not going to make mistakes. He's just going to hand the ball off well, and he's going to hit the short and medium routes and get the ball into the hands of their playmakers and allow them to make plays. However, I think after this year, if you're Zach Wilson, if you're the Jets, you got to take a good, hard look in the mirror and go, okay, is this the right marriage? Is Zach Wilson really going to be the guy? And if you ask me that question right now, it's absolutely not. And I think the Jets are realizing that, going to so many different quarterbacks. Strevler was the fourth quarterback to play for the Jets this year. Zach Wilson, I think, has all the talent in the world. He makes plays, and we've seen it this year where he makes a throw where he's one of 5 guys in the entire world that can make that type of throw. But then he'll just make absolute boneheaded decisions and throw it directly to a defender. So I do think that the Jets are definitely going to be going with Mike White at the very least for the rest of the year. And then come off season time, and you can go over the playoff scenario. But at this point, the writing's kind of on the wall. I do not believe Zach Wilson is going to be a New York Jet next season.
Well, here's the thing. I think the Jets can survive. I truly do believe it. They can survive missing on Zach Wilson. What they can't do is survive doubling down on him. You see it in the NFL. You have to move on. You have to throw away that he's a second overall pick. He hasn't shown you anything. If you go into next season with Zach Wilson as your starting quarterback, there is no reason to believe, based on what we've seen, he's going to figure it out. He has no confidence right now. His mechanics are completely off. Even if you fix that, his arm's not as big as you thought coming in. The decision-making is not there whatsoever. He hasn't put it together in a complete game. I think he's one game over an 100 passer rating in his entire career. That's 22 games. You look at even what the Jets have done. You look at the backups here. The backups are putting up more points per game, more net yards a game, more yards per game total. The offense moves better with a backup CFL quarterback who cannot throw the football. He was able to get more yards on one drive than Zach Wilson in that first half versus the Jaguars. Plus, he had 2 more drives in the second half, went 3 and out. Then he was benched. That's very telling that he's not your franchise guy. So the Jets, I know we just heard Robert Saleh not really commit at this point in the year. That makes complete sense. I remember when he got hired, he was talking up Sam Darnold. He was not being committal one way or another. You have to admit your mistake. The personality, the player, none of it is meshing well in New York. You have to move on. So I think that's very clear, Danny. And I guess you brought up the playoff scenario. What if? Because, shockingly enough, and I think this adds some more frustration, if the Jets had been able to steal one of these 2 games, you'd be feeling really good about their chances, because the hardest thing that has to be accomplished is they win their next 2. What they need, the out-of-town scoreboard, is the Raiders need to lose 1 game. They're home versus the Steelers, I believe, or at the Steelers, then home versus the Niners and Chiefs. So that's an automatic X right there. Then you need both the Dolphins and the Patriots to lose this week. Patriots play the Bengals, okay. There's something there. And the Dolphins play the Packers. And you can't count out an Aaron Rodgers team. And then you just need the Dolphins to beat the Patriots in week 17. That's like 3 things that need to go their way outside of 2-0. But at the end of the day, what we've seen from this team, losing 4 straight, it'd be hard-pressed to believe they win the last 2 games of the year at Seattle, then at Miami. And really quickly, Danny, I think it's so fitting. I said this a few weeks ago when the Jets were kind of not spiraling. How fitting would it be if Geno Smith is the one at home in Seattle who ends mathematically the Jets' playoff chances? It's the writing on the wall. It's how things go for the Jets, and it probably will happen next week.
I definitely think that is very fitting. And the sad part about these Jets playoff hopes, before we wrap it up real quick, I think all of those things are possible outside of the Jets going 2-0 in their last 2.
It probably will all happen, if we're being quite honest, the way it goes. And then the Jets won't go 2-0, and they'll continue the NFL's longest playoff drought.
Very tough in New York right now. But for Ryan Gregware, I am Danny Scott. This was a production of WFUV Sports.